What if the children I was about to lose were the very ones who could save me? Daniel Whitmore's voice trembled as the question ripped through his thoughts, louder than the chaos of his empire, heavier than the grief he had carried for 5 long years. He had spent so much of his life hiding behind walls of wealth, convincing himself that control and discipline could protect him from pain. But now, staring into the desperate eyes of a little girl clutching her baby brother, he felt those walls collapsing. Fear clawed at him, fear of caring again, fear of losing again. But something deeper burned inside, a longing he thought had died with his wife. He could already sense that if he stepped forward, if he chose them, his life would never be the same. And yet behind that terror was the faint, electrifying pulse of hope. He whispered to himself, almost like a vow, "If I walk this path, I may lose everything I built, but I might finally find the one thing I've been searching for." Stay with me, because what happens next will shake every belief Daniel held about love, sacrifice, and the true meaning of family. The late afternoon air in Boston carried a sharp edge, the kind that hinted winter was near. Daniel Whitmore adjusted the cuff of his dark suit as he stepped out of St. Catherine's Hospital. The meeting he had just left had been long, draining, and filled with numbers that refused to add up. For most of his 43 years, Daniel had built his empire with precision, control, and discipline. But even in the quiet hum of victory, he often felt hollow. The death of his wife 5 years ago had carved a permanent silence in his life, one he filled with endless work and shallow nights of loneliness. He pressed a hand to his temple, bracing himself for another evening of solitude in his empty Cambridge mansion. But as the heavy glass doors closed behind him, something caught his eye, a small figure seated on the sidewalk near the entrance. A little girl no older than 8 sat hunched on the cold stone, her hair tied back with a rubber band that looked like it was about to snap. In her arms, she cradled a newborn baby wrapped in a worn, faded blanket. Her eyes were dark, too old for her young face, and when she looked up at him, Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. "Sir," she asked, her voice trembling, yet steady. Do you work here?" Daniel froze, unsure why a child would mistake him for hospital staff. His expensive suit, his commanding stride, it must have been enough. He shook his head slowly. "No, I don't." "Why are you here?" She glanced toward the hospital doors. "Our mom's inside. She's really sick. We don't have anywhere to go." The words struck Daniel harder than he expected. He looked around the bustling Boston street, moved on commuters, rushing cabs, honking people, lost in their own lives. But here 2 children sat completely unnoticed. He crouched down, his voice lowering. "How long have you been sitting here?" "Since last night." The girl tightened her hold on the baby. "His name is Noah. He was born yesterday." Daniel's chest tightened. He studied the infant, so fragile, so new to the world, and the girl who had clearly taken it upon herself to protect him. Something about the scene stirred a memory he had buried, one of helplessness, of loss. "Do you have family?" "Anyone who can help?" Daniel asked. The girl shook her head. "Just Mom. Our dad, he died before Noah was born." Her voice cracked, then steadied again with a resilience far beyond her years. Daniel's throat went dry. He almost stood to leave, to remind himself that this wasn't his responsibility, that his life had no space for other people's burdens. He had spent years teaching himself not to care too deeply. Caring always came with a cost. But then he asked the question, "What's your mother's name?" The girl's answer sent a jolt through him. "Clara Hayes." Daniel staggered back a step, his heart hammering against his ribs. Clara Hayes. The name echoed in his mind like a ghost rising from the past. He hadn't spoken it aloud in decades, but it had never truly left him. Clara, the girl who sat behind him in history class, who laughed at his jokes when no one else did, the one he had admired from a distance and never had the courage to tell. He remembered her auburn hair glinting under the sun, her determination to chase dreams he never dared to follow. And now she was here, suffering, broken, abandoned by fate. He swallowed hard, torn between disbelief and recognition. "Clara, is your mother Clara Hayes?" The girl nodded quickly, adjusting baby Noah in her arms. For a moment, the world blurred around him. His lost love, the woman he had secretly cherished but never confessed to, was fighting for her life just steps away. And her children sat out here on the cold ground, unseen, unwanted, except by him. Inside, a storm raged. "Walk away," one voice whispered. You've lost enough already. Getting involved will only break you again. But another voice, louder, steadier, demanded, you owe her this. After all these years, destiny has placed her back in your hands. Before he could think too much, Daniel found himself striding back inside the hospital. He demanded to speak to the social worker. Minutes later, he was staring down at documents that spelled out the tragic truth. Clara had suffered serious complications after giving birth. She had no insurance, no family to rely on. Without help, her children would be separated: Noah into special infant care, Emily into foster homes that might never reunite them. Daniel's jaw clenched. His mind screamed for logic, but his heart overruled. I'll take them, he said abruptly. His own voice startled him. The social worker blinked. Mr. Whitmore, this isn't typical procedure. Are you sure? No, he admitted, but I can't leave them on the street. That evening, his black car cut through the Boston traffic, carrying him Emily and baby Noah. Emily sat silently, a small plastic bag of belongings on her lap. At one point, she reached into it and pulled out a crumpled photograph, her parents on a sunny day, Clara smiling radiantly beside a man Daniel didn't know. Emily offered it to him shyly. This is Mom and Dad, she whispered. Daniel's heart twisted as he recognized Clara's youthful face in the photo. The girl he had once loved so deeply still had that same smile, though life had stolen its light. When they arrived at his Cambridge mansion, Emily stared wide-eyed at the towering stone house. Daniel had never noticed how cold it felt until now. No toys scattered, no laughter echoing, no sign of life, just shadows and silence. That night, after a simple dinner, Daniel walked past the guest room where Emily lay curled beside Noah. Their soft breathing drifted into the hall. He stood there in the dark, conflicted. It was supposed to be 2 days, just 2 days until Clara was stable enough to take them back. But as he listened, something broke inside him. 2 days might never be enough. And for the first time in years, Daniel felt something stir in the emptiness, a fragile, dangerous thing called hope. The following morning in Cambridge, Daniel Whitmore awoke to sounds he hadn't heard in years. Tiny footsteps padding down the hallway, a child's muffled whisper, the faint whimper of a newborn stirring from sleep. He sat up in bed, momentarily disoriented, his mind still clinging to the memory of the quiet mansion he had lived in since his wife's death. For 5 years, mornings had been defined by silence, the kind that gnawed at him and reminded him of all he had lost. But now the air vibrated with new life, and the realization shook him as much as it warmed him. Downstairs, he found Emily already awake, carefully cradling Noah in her thin arms. She was trying to prepare a bottle of formula, her small hands fumbling with the container. Daniel stepped forward. Let me help, he offered. She hesitated before handing it over. I usually do it myself. Mom taught me. The words carried weight far too heavy for a child, and Daniel felt a pang of guilt. Emily had become both sister and mother to Noah, carrying burdens she never should have known. He mixed the formula and held Noah awkwardly in his arms. At first, the baby fussed and Daniel's grip tightened nervously. But then Noah latched on and a soft calm settled over him. For a brief moment, Daniel caught Emily watching him, her eyes wide with something that looked like hope. Later that day, Daniel drove them back to St. Catherine's Hospital to visit Clara. His pulse quickened as he walked into the sterile room. Clara looked pale, her body fragile against the white sheets, but when her eyes met his, recognition flickered. Daniel, she whispered, her voice hoarse but filled with something unspoken. He pulled a chair close. Clara, it's been a long time. She managed a faint smile. Too long. And now you see me like this. Her gaze shifted toward Emily and Noah, her eyes brimming with guilt and love. They deserve better than what I've given them. Daniel swallowed hard. Seeing her this way shattered him. This was the woman who once lit up classrooms with her laughter, who dreamed of traveling the world. Now she lay tethered to machines, weighed down by tragedy. For a fleeting moment, he wondered what if he had told her how he felt back then. Would her life have been different? Would she have been spared this pain? That night, lying awake in his Cambridge mansion, Daniel wrestled with questions he couldn't silence. He had built walls around his heart to survive his own loss, but Clara's reappearance had torn those walls apart. He wanted to help, but fear gnawed at him. Was he strong enough to carry her burdens and the children's? Was he ready to risk losing again? The following days tested him in ways he never anticipated. Caring for Noah became both terrifying and transformative. Sleepless nights blurred into mornings filled with bottles and diapers. Emily, though astonishingly capable, was still a child, sometimes breaking down in quiet sobs when she thought no one was looking. One evening, as Daniel tried clumsily to build a tower of blocks for Noah, Emily whispered from the corner, "He likes you." Daniel looked up. "Does he?" She nodded. "Noah doesn't laugh much, but he laughed when you did that." A strange ache filled Daniel's chest. He wanted to laugh it off, to insist he wasn't meant for this. But instead, he found himself whispering, "Maybe I'm not as hopeless as I thought." But just as he began to adjust to this fragile new rhythm, life pulled the rug out from under him. One afternoon at a nearby park, Emily suddenly collapsed. Daniel's heart raced as he lifted her small, limp body into his arms and rushed her back to St. Catherine's. He stayed at her bedside the entire night, barely blinking, terrified she wouldn't wake. When Clara learned of his vigil, tears filled her eyes. "You stayed with her," she whispered weakly. "I couldn't leave," he admitted, his voice raw. "Not again. Not anyone I care about." It was a confession as much to himself as it was to Clara. The next crisis came from his business. Daniel's board of directors grew restless with his absence. He had canceled meetings, skipped calls, and ignored investors. One evening, after finally answering a barrage of calls, he sat in his office listening as they threatened to strip him of his CEO position. Daniel, one voice barked through the speakerphone. "This company cannot survive your distractions. You either return to the office tomorrow or we'll vote on your removal." He stared at the family photos still hanging on the wall, pictures of him and his late wife smiling in happier times. His chest tightened. He had fought so long to keep control, to protect his empire. But for the first time, the thought of losing it didn't terrify him as much as the thought of losing Emily and Noah. The next morning, he shocked the board by walking into the meeting and saying, "For years, I chose money over people. I told myself it was strength, that it was discipline. But the truth is, I was hiding, and I'm done hiding. If I lose this company because I choose family, then so be it." Gasps rippled through the room. Some directors stormed out in anger. Others sat in stunned silence. Daniel's heart pounded, but he felt strangely free. That night back at the mansion, Emily asked him a simple question while Noah slept in her lap. "Will you still be here tomorrow?" The words pierced deeper than any business threat. Daniel knelt beside her and said softly, "As long as you need me, Emily, I'll be here." For the first time, she smiled without fear clouding her eyes. Yet deep inside, Daniel knew the hardest choice still lay ahead. This wasn't just about temporary care. It was about deciding whether he was ready to risk everything: his fortune, his guarded heart, and the safety of the world he had built, to embrace a family that destiny had dropped on his doorstep. The days that followed moved like a fragile dream, filled with both hope and unease. Clara Hayes was finally released from St. Catherine's Hospital, her body still weak, but her spirit slowly fighting its way back. Daniel drove her, Emily and baby Noah, to her small apartment in Somerville. The building leaned with age, its walls cracked, and the windows patched with tape and cardboard. Inside, the air was cold and the kitchen cupboards nearly bare. Daniel stood quietly in the doorway as Clara lowered herself into a chair, ashamed of her surroundings. "I know it's not much," she whispered, her voice breaking. Daniel shook his head firmly. "Clara, it doesn't matter where you live. What matters is that Emily and Noah still have you, and they're not going to face this world alone, not while I'm here." Clara's eyes welled with tears. She had never expected that the boy who once sat behind her in class, the one who secretly admired her smile, would reappear in her darkest hour. Yet here he was, carrying her burdens as if they were his own. In the weeks that followed, Daniel did everything he could to help. He stocked the shelves with food, paid for repairs, and even arranged for Emily to start school again. He transformed part of his Cambridge mansion into a warm, child-friendly space so Emily and Noah could always feel welcome there. The once empty halls that had haunted him with silence now echoed with laughter, the soft cries of a baby, and the simple sound of life. For the first time since his wife's death, Daniel felt alive. But just as hope seemed to take root, another blow came. One afternoon, a letter from social services arrived. Clara's case had been reviewed, and although she was recovering, her fragile health made it uncertain whether she could care for both children alone. A foster family had been identified wealthy, stable, and willing to adopt Emily and Noah permanently. Daniel read the letter in silence, his chest tightening with dread. That night, Emily climbed into his lap, clutching his shirt with small trembling fingers. "I don't want to leave you," she whispered. "Please don't let them take us away." Her words cut deeper than any business loss ever could. Daniel had faced boardrooms full of ruthless investors, yet nothing had ever terrified him as much as the possibility of losing these two children. He knew then that he couldn't stand by. The next week at a business gala, Clara overheard cruel whispers from women nearby. "She's just using Daniel for money. Look at her single mother clinging to him." Clara's face flushed with shame, and she considered walking out of Daniel's life altogether. But before she could, Daniel stood before the entire crowd and said clearly, "These children, Emily and Noah, are my family. And Clara, she is not someone taking from me. She is the reason I found my heart again." His words silenced the room. Clara's tears fell freely this time, not from shame, but from gratitude. Yet fate tested them once more. On the eve of the custody hearing, Noah developed a dangerously high fever. Panic spread through Clara's apartment as his tiny body shook. Daniel rushed him back to St. Catherine's and refused to leave his side. He sat through the night holding the baby's tiny hand, whispering promises he wasn't even sure the infant could hear. "You're not alone, Noah. I'm not leaving. Not now, not ever." When the fever finally broke at dawn, Daniel knew his heart had chosen long before his mind dared admit it. Weeks later, after hearings, endless paperwork, and long conversations with social workers, Daniel was granted guardianship. The relief that washed over Emily's face when she heard the news was something he would never forget. She threw her arms around his neck and whispered, "We're safe now." Clara, healthier and stronger, stood beside them, her eyes full of the same admiration she once carried in school, but now mingled with love and trust. On a warm spring afternoon, they gathered in Daniel's garden in Cambridge. Blossoms filled the air with their fragrance, sunlight danced through the branches, and the sound of laughter filled the yard. Emily chased butterflies while Noah tottered on uncertain legs. Clara stood beside Daniel watching their children play, and for the first time in years, both of them allowed themselves to breathe. Daniel turned to Clara, his voice low but steady. "I thought I lost my chance at a family forever, but fate gave me another chance through you, through them, and I'm not going to waste it." Clara reached for his hand, tears glistening in her eyes. "You didn't just save us, Daniel. You saved yourself too." As they stood together, surrounded by the children's laughter, the mansion no longer felt haunted by loss. It felt like home. Daniel finally understood family wasn't defined by blood or perfection, but by the courage to love again, even when it hurt, even when the risk was unbearable. Love had found its way back to him, and with it a new beginning. If you were Clara, would you have trusted Daniel after all those years apart? If you were Daniel, would you have risked your empire and reputation to fight for these children? What do you think of this story? Thank you for staying with me and listening until the very end. If you loved it, please comment No 3 below. If it felt just okay, No 2, and if it didn't meet your expectations, No 1. Tell me which country you're watching from, and don't forget to drop a heart and share this story so more people can experience it. See you in the next emotional story.